Have you ever seen the? I'm sure you've been to the DIA. Have you ever seen the Detroit Industry mural at
Yes,
DIA? Yeah,
many
Th-
times.
yeah. That's one that for somebody like me, that's that feels strongly about. Like that's one that like I bet you 100 people walk by, especially like 15 years ago. 100 people would walk by Detroit Industry, the mural, and like not even really care about. But even back then, somebody like me who's like concerned about labor and struggle in the country, like I see it and it like hits, you know. But if 100 people walk by it, maybe 5, 10 people would give a shit right now. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that
Yeah.
was that mural you're actually talking about. That's one that I saw many times as a kid because we also went to the science center that's right by there a lot when I was a kid because I was
Hmm.
super into science and
Same,
space
dude.
and uh
Space camp, baby.
and so
Woo!
we'd also go there. Heck
Yeah.
yeah, space camp. I
Yep.
loved it.
Hmm.
White privilege shit. Uh
Totally.
but
Totally.
so but that was one that I had seen it so many times. It was that because growing up, I saw it a lot. So once I started going as I got older on my own, I s- I walked right by it to check out what are the new exhibits in here now that I haven't seen. And once I heard the story behind it, and I went back and like looked, I guess, in more detail because I had seen it so many times. As an adult, I didn't remember any of the detail because why
Right.
check it out again? I know what it is. And
Yep.
re-looking at that with that story behind it of who
Hmm.
painted it, why, what it represents, man, that I went from feeling nothing and walking past that like, wow, whatever, this gets me to the good art. Like,
Right.
and
Right.
it was one of those where I almost felt like a corny movie or show where like it clicked in a second and like almost tears in my eyes of like, oh, I finally get it. Like, I
Yeah.
get it now. Like,
Yeah.
wow. And then for me, I'm the type that since I love creating art, I start thinking of like, think of the amount of hours and days
Hmm.
spent in here creating this with that
Pure
thought
dedication.
and with that thought every day of I'm creating this with a purpose of
Yes.
like, that is a feeling I want to carry through of like someone was willing to spend that much time and effort on that for a reason. And it's just wild how like just sometimes it doesn't hit you and sometimes it's a slap in the face and you're like,
Right.
why am I tearing up? Like what is
Yeah.
happening? Well, why am I feeling so
Why
much?
is this just hitting me
Yeah,
so hard right
it's
now?
just these colors thrown on a wall with a brush. Like what?
Right.
What? And that's funny that you brought that one up because I was one of those. I walked past it
So many
so many
times.
times. Like this is the entranceway to the good stuff almost.
Yep.
Like
Yep. Yep. And then
and
you see it and it just hits, dude.
and
At one
I'm
point, you've gotten to like
yeah,
you've gotten the societal context that has carried over from that artist where he's like, this is where I want people to be at, like in their own headspace when they look at this. And when
yes.
you're in that spot where he wanted you to be and you look at it, you're like, damn, that's some
Yes.
good shit.
And it's like it makes me wish, you know how they'll have signs, especially that one. There's signs up explaining bits of it. I
Right.
wish they had something of like before you walk in, hey,
Yeah.
know
Calm
this.
down. Yeah.
Know this. Know this and then go in, okay? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Slow your
like
roll a little bit because this shit's dope.
yeah, because if you take a second and know what this is about and then see it, man,
Right.
like
Right. Especially in Detroit, like, and that's one thing that I think is unique for us being living where we live is that um, in other areas, leftists like ourselves are struggling on many fronts, like we are. But one front that they're struggling on in a really deep way is pushing back against anti-union organizing, anti-union pushing back. Like they're on the front line of that in ideologically and in so many ways more than we do. I think there's a lot of people that are on the right in our community that have deep family ties to labor organizing, and that's one thing that they won't give up. even, no matter how far they go, they're like, no, my union is good. Like, Fox News can't convince me of that one, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And that is a great city for that type of stuff. There's a lot of history of what has gone well and gone poorly for unions. And
right
in the auto industry is mind-boggling, the stuff that has gone through that.
Definitely.
And it's also amazing, though, to see people still fighting for it and doing some great things every now and then. Not as much as I'm sure they all hope, but at least they're still trying. They're still going. There's some still really doing it.
Right. And don't get me wrong, we do definitely still get, we definitely still do get the anti-union stuff here. I just feel like it's way less pronounced than it would be in a lot of other areas in the country. Like, we'll still get, I know there's a buddy of mine that I've talked to unions about quite a few times, and he's right wing, and his reaction is always like, Jimmy Hoffa, corruption, like all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, dude, I get it. There's been corrupt union stuff. There's been situations in which, all things being equal, an employee probably should have lost their job and the union helped them out. There's been situations where employees using their tenure at a union have been taking more from their employer than their contract stipulated. I'll put it that way, right? I don't mean theft. I mean, slacking off on the job,
definitely
taking back some of that labor that they've had exploited forever. That's my opinion. But so that stuff happens for sure. Absolutely. But if you look at the whole pie of like who's getting what and who's doing what wrong, the CEOs and the higher level people that are involved in corruption, or they're not giving their fair share. Like, look at a minimum, we're talking about 450% increase in CEO pay across the country versus like an 18% increase in wage for workers over the past 50 odd years, whatever it looks like, right? So at a minimum, they're getting compensated 450 times more, or 450% more than they were in the past. So yeah, sometimes taking a little bit of that back, I'm okay with. And you can call it corruption. You can call it, oh, this employee was, because of where we live, sometimes you'll hear, oh, this employee's on crack. The implication being very clear. Yep. Oh, this person was on crack at the job. And, I'm not advocating doing crack at work, but I think one employee doing crack at work is significantly less damaging to society than a CEO making $5 million 50 years ago and making, $97 million, $150 million this year. Like I'm sorry that those two things are not even close to being equal. And I'm not saying let the dude do crack, to be clear, but I'm saying like, but that's also, that's like, right? But crack is good. No.
We want to thank you for flying with us. We know you could have stayed home, just cried and cussed. Mail your guns go off if it's time to bust. Mail their tanks have time to rust. They got the armies turning bullets into gold. They got the hookers turning tricks into cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the O. And even if a D-boy flips in my O, it ain't enough to buy shit anymore. Sleep in the doorway, piss on the floor. Look in the sky, wait for missiles to show. It's finna blow, cause they got the TV, we got the truth. They own the judges and we got the proof. We got hella people, they got helicopters. They got the bombs and we got the guillotine.
Now you can bang it like a shotgun. We in the war before we fall. Now if the time of work is late, I'm coming in to be with God. Now you can bang it like a shotgun. We in the war before
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of From Right to Red. My name is Craig. I'm joined with my co-host Paul, and to paraphrase Harvey Milk, we want to recruit you. If you're listening to this right now, you're either some of our close friends and family, an extremely online leftist, or hopefully somebody in your life recognized that you're on the same path that Paul and myself found ourselves on years ago, and sent you a link to this podcast in the hopes that you'd be willing to listen to some different ideas and arguments that could challenge your existing worldview. So whether you identify as center-left, center-right, right-wing, Republican, Democrat, centrist, or as a buddy of mine likes to say, middleist, however you identify politically, we want to provide you with some discussion, thoughts, ideas that might challenge the way you think about things ideologically. An amazing man once said, "We don't have the right to say that we're tired of explaining. We must never stop explaining. We know that when the people understand, they cannot help but follow us." With that in mind, I want to be clear that the ultimate goal of our podcast is to explain. We want to explain some common misconceptions that are held by folks in our own community, held by people on the right, held by people in the center and center left. We want to set the record straight about misconceptions of leftist ideas, history, and societies. If you're on the right or consider yourself a centrist, independent, libertarian, or really any other mainstream American political ideology, I know that you're rolling your eyes into the back of your head right now, and that's totally okay. We fully understand the exact feelings that you're having right now just listening to this intro, because both Paul and myself have been in your exact position. We both have similar upbringing to many of you, and we both have a similar long and winding political background. So, with that introduction out of the way, Paul, why don't you speak a little bit about the path that brought you to the broader left, as it were?
I had a whole long thing written out, and I'm going to breeze through it because it's way too much. Because really the important things to know is that, like, I was growing up in the Midwest, and it's a very specific part of the U.S. that a lot of people will recognize if they know. Our family was middle class, working class, in the suburbs all the time, in the Midwest, growing up not worrying about if there will be food on the table, just it's probably off-brand. That type of deal. Normally, I was, as a young kid, always reading, which I think ended up being important in the long run. But even at a young age, I remember adults just looking at me like, why is this kid reading Edgar Allan Poe at a birthday party and then talking to the adults instead? He's 10. Like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. So I've always kind of known I was a little weird, maybe, or different in a sense. Right. But I also was interested in almost everything at a certain point because I was reading, I would play hockey, skateboard, I learned music. I played in a youth group band with a church, photography, everything. And I just wanted to learn everything and discover what I do and don't like. And eventually that followed me into politics, although I wish it followed me sooner because there was so much I didn't have the opportunity to read that I wish I could have read earlier. But a lot of it stemmed from my growing up, my family putting me in private school and public school, mostly Lutheran or Baptist, and very strict right conservative. And that is the way. And there is no other way, or else name calling, and that's it. One person in our family always endlessly tortured about being the one Democrat in the family. And fun fact about that, my grandfather then decided when he ran for a local office, he was going to run Republican because all of his friends were, and he wasn't going to win unless he ran that way. For me, that was like, as a teenager, like, oh, so our politics are just kind of a joke? Like, it's like, it doesn't even mean anything for him to sacrifice all of his morals to just go the other way for a position of power. Insane to me. But as I ventured away from that, first I went the religious route. So I read other religious books besides what I was told, just out of curiosity mostly. So eventually that led my political views to go from how I was raised on the right where I was just kind of repeating what I heard, was told, was taught. Didn't really understand what I was saying when I said those things, though. And that made me have a hard turn to the left. But like American left, Democrat, not the full left. I mean,
What you thought at the time
Yes.
was the expanse that we could go to.
yes, I said a lot of silly things that now I laugh at hearing people say. Like, I am like on the left socially, on the right fiscally, that type of thing, which then very quickly turned into like a libertarian, almost anarchy of, I was just so mad of neither party seems to represent me. And I only have those two options because we know the Green Party doesn't
Right.
win. The Libertarians don't win. Like, nothing else is winning. And it just,
Right.
for me, it turned to anger and just, screw this whole system. It all sucks. There's nothing for me. And it almost discouraged me to the point that I didn't keep investigating. And a very big thing happened to me where, doesn't matter why, but I needed to go to the hospital. And
Yeah.
my first thought of someone calling an ambulance to come pick me up was not, oh, good, because I clearly need help. No thought of that. My first thought was, no, like, how am I going to pay for that if I especially have to pay a hospital bill too? Like, you know how much an ambulance costs? Like, is it covered on my insurance? Like, I shouldn't be thinking of insurance in that moment. But the thoughts after that original anger are what stuck with me of, I kind of considered myself privileged, but being privileged, white, you know, like food on the table, no one's perfect. No one's family's perfect. Nothing's
Yeah.
perfect, but compared to most, man, and I'm still worried about like a basic healthcare need. Like, imagine how many people have it worse. And like, that's not even an option to go to the hospital unless they're at a point where credit doesn't matter. They just won't pay it. But then that's a tough, you can't get back out of that easily in this system. So it started making me think about those deeper things and how much of an issue it really was. And it brought me back to starting to read political stuff again. I had read Chomsky before at a young age, not really getting it, nothing really connected. And when I found Marxism, man, it was like Aladdin. Like, we got a whole brave new world here. like this whole thing, like, I always thought politics never represents me. And I'm like, oh, this is a way I actually could be represented, and we could hold these big corporations accountable for what they're doing. Like, it was insane to me that it had been demonized for so long that I couldn't discover it easily until my late 20s in America. That was insane. And now that I'm in it and loving it, I just want to keep discussing it, having these talks with people. And I think that's the best thing we can do. Open discourse. Instead of just yelling, why don't we talk about things and be reasonable, have discussions, explore it, and hopefully laugh along the way? Because like, it's also,
gotta be
you
funny.
can't take yourself too serious either. But like,
Yeah.
I need that to be what I get out of this, I guess, is just discussions, exploring ideas, and realizing there are these other ideas out there.
Yep. And hopefully introducing these ideas to people that have no idea about them, you know, or have no previous experience with them. So I have kind of a similar, but in many ways different upbringing than Paul. I mean, there's a lot of similarity, but some difference, you know. The important thing, I think, for me, as far as background and politics, is I never really had to care, you know, when I was very young about any of that. You know, that's just the reality. But when I got into high school, and I was in high school when 9/11 took place, for whatever reason, I just gravitated towards that right-wing hawkery that was happening at the time. And I was like all in, and I was paying attention. I was at that point where I was just starting to pay attention to the news. So it really affected my life, like right at that moment when I was like becoming aware politically, and the biggest thing politically that's happened in decades was happening like simultaneously, you know? So it got me into this hawkery. I started following the news very closely, and I was all in for war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, all of it. So the important part for me that started my like leftward turn politically was somebody close to me went over to Iraq, you know, and they came back and they just were never themselves again. And there was something that had obviously changed drastically, you know, PTSD, and that really made me think differently about like, okay, what is actually taking place over there, instead of just thinking of it in like this strategic like Civ 6 or whatever games these people are playing, where it's just like a tactical thing. You know, it's, you know, we gotta get over there and fight these other countries. That there's like a meta level to that makes you not really connected to the humanity of what's happening there. But then when it affects somebody in your life and changes them fundamentally, you know, with PTSD, it really makes you think about the brutality of what's happening on the ground over there. And suddenly it just clicked in me like, this is not the right thing that we should be doing at all, obviously. And I started turning, you know, left from there. And, you know, I was a Obama guy. I volunteered I got, you know, pretty heavily involved in volunteering for different democratic causes. And that felt okay for a while. You know, there was a lot of hope that was felt when Obama was coming in that fizzled, because the lack of things that we wanted to see getting done, that they just weren't happening at the rate we needed them to, you know. And then the default response kind of became, the zeitgeist kind of became, well, he can't do all of those big promises, you know, closing Guantanamo Bay, like the big things that we had all pushed for. He can't do those until his second term, because he can't alienate the middle and the right too much. He's got to get elected again so he can do 2 terms, and it's the second term when he's going to do all the big stuff. And that was the justification. So I was in it again, you know, like, all right, I'm in with Obama, and it's like, I'm going for it. And that second term of Obama just like turned me off politically, because it was just so much could have been done there that was not even thought about. There was no push. There was no anything. And I thought, okay, well, at this point, I know the Republicans are bad and I do not want to be associated with that. But I did all this work for the Democrats and it got me nothing of what I wanted. You know, they didn't do anything. So what's the point? So I just kind of like dropped out for a while until I started finding, you know, like you said, some Marxist literature that suddenly was like, oh, there's always been this other thing that separates those two parties from the actual left. You know, it's because those two parties are still adherents to capital. Like capital is their interest. They have to get elected. They need money to get elected, so they take money. Like, that's the way that it works for them. So you can't get past that point. But when you bring in like the Marxist theory, that other thing that those two don't have in common with the actual left, it suddenly makes sense. Like, oh, that's exactly, now I can see exactly why they're doing that. And I can see that them doing that is completely against what I want. Like, there's no way, there's like the things that I want are being hindered by that. And, you know, that's just where I am right now. And I'm obviously not going to come on each episode and talk about that so explicitly, but that's just, I need people to know that's the bias that I'm coming from. You know, that's the way that I view the world. And I'm not always going to talk that heavy about it. But when you hear an analysis of something from me or a joke, you gotta know where my headspace is at, you know?
Yeah.
So there we go.
When Craig starts dropping F slurs everywhere, you got to understand why.
You got to understand that I'm historicizing something.
You know, it's just a different time.
Yeah. Let me historicize for a few minutes. Beep, 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 beep.
Oh, man. And then after that, he's doing a reading of Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah.
Only certain
Absolutely.
parts.
Just the good parts.
Yeah, just his favorite little excerpts from it.
Oh my God.
So, something I do want, just, even if it's never used, I need this recorded somewhere. Me saying someone else's quote of how very important it is to bring about in the human mind the radical revolution. The crisis is a crisis of consciousness, a crisis that cannot anymore accept the old laws, the old patterns, the ancient traditions. Considering what the world is now, with all the misery, conflict, destructive brutality, aggression, and so on, man is still just going to be brutal, violent, aggressive, competitive, and we've built a society along those lines.
That's a beautiful quote. Wait, what is that from? I feel like I know that.
I know for sure you have watched all of the Zeitgeist movies, so you've heard it. It is at the
Yeah,
beginning
I
of
have.
one of them. And it's a quote that has
you're right.
stuck with me always from even before I heard it there. I saw it on an old camera, recorded it, and it was uploaded to YouTube. And then I saw it on Zeitgeist, and it's always just a quote that, whew.
Dude, those things are wild. Things like that. Those cult movies during VHS times is wild to me. Do you remember Loose Change?
Oh, how could I forget?
Right, like that was, and I know it was already YouTube at that point. I think when Loose Change was,
I'm
was
pretty
really
sure it was
getting-
on VHS as well, though.
But yeah, it was still, even though it was like the VHS of YouTube at the time, the Loose Change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the YouTube was a thing, and you could go there, and most people watch normal things. But Loose Change was like, hey, you want to see the darker side of YouTube right now? Let me show you Loose Change.
And if that capitalist free market really worked the way it was supposed to, beta would have beat out VHS. Okay.
100%.
The better product would have won.
That shit happens in technology all the time. And I'll get into a whole conversation about how we constantly, even in this supposed free market, pick winners and losers all the time. But yeah, you're 100%
It's
correct. Like,
insane.
it was a better format. Everybody knows that.
Oh, man.
Did you ever pick any loser technology?
I showed you my Zoom.
Oh, that's right. I had a mini disc player. Have you ever seen those?
Oh, I think I had one.
Dude, I had one. Let me pull it up
I think I had one of those.
and send it to you. Make sure we're talking the same thing here.
They were like even smaller than like a GameCube disc, right?
This is it right here, dude. I'm such a boomer right now. I cannot believe I'm doing this. I'm sorry. I'm sending you an eBay link to one that I found. How funny is that? Dude, I had
Yes.
this exact thing right here, dude.
Yes. I had one.
It's like a, it was like a cassette player,
Yeah.
like a tape cassette player, but much smaller, like half the size. And it had these little discs that were mini discs, and they looked like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's weird, but I was like, oh, this is way better than getting an MP3 player or whatever. And I was like, this is the way to go for sure. But then it like recorded. You had to like record it in a certain way, otherwise you would have to like fast forward through it like a tape. Oh, dude, it was the worst fucking. The interface was garbage. Everything about it sucked. I hated it, dude.
Yeah, that's where actually
sucked.
my loser product, the Zune, didn't win out over the iPod, but I'll tell you what, I did really like it. It
Yeah,
was
I
solid.
always
You
heard the
could
Zunes were
throw
pretty
it
good.
against the wall and it would be fine.
Yeah.
It was a brick.
I didn't have one myself, but obviously, because I made the correct choice and got a mini disc player, that did
The
numbers
correct
for me.
choice.
So, yeah, yeah. So I
correct
didn't have. I was not like an early adopter of any Apple products, including iPod. I didn't have that. I didn't have the Zune either. But I'd seen them and played with them.
I was the first one the Shuffle and the regular iPod. I think
It was
the regular one and then the Shuffle.
regular
Yeah.
one and then the Shuffle.
So I had the Shuffle. So I skipped the first one and got the Zune instead. And then I was like, well, they're already making 3 new Apple ones. Let me try one of those.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think the first one, the tagline was like 1,000 songs in your pocket or something like that.
Yep.
But it was like big.
Oh.
And 1,000's not a lot of songs.
Yeah. But back then it was
I
that
know.
or you have an album. Like you have the 12 songs on
Yeah.
your CD. So 1,000 songs is like, oh, that's like I'm carrying my whole album case, which
Yeah.
remember, did you ever have one of the
Car
cool
album cases?
the visor car case
Oh, of
with all your
course.
CDs in it? Probably some
course.
cool like Limp Bizkit 311.
Right. Right. You're nailing it.
And
dude.
then
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know whose Britney Spears album that is. They must have left it in my car. I don't know why it's
Right.
up there.
Did you get to the point where you knew just by feel? You didn't have to take your eyes off the road?
Yep.
You're like, spot 3?
Yep.
Yeah.
And some of them were just awesome mixtapes I made too of cool music
Yep.
that I totally didn't download illegally on the interwebs.
Right. Dude, remember sitting down and curating a playlist? Like, I don't do that anymore.
Like, because
I don't know if you still do, but I used to sit down and like, you had to think, you had to plan it out. 'Cause
Especially-
it was you had to burn it onto
yeah,
a CD.
with CDs, it's like, what order do I want these songs in?
Yep.
And you can only fit so many on there. Like sometimes you'd
Mm-hmm.
get like 20, 25 songs at most onto one CD.
Right.
So it's like you had to carefully select it. And then you have a whole CD for like, oh, when I go on a date, this is the CD that's going to be in. Like,
Yeah,
these are all the
yeah.
best songs. And then it's just like the worst pop music from that time.
Right. Oh God. That's too true, dude.
Yeah, but that was you had a crush on a girl back then. It was like, make her a fire mixtape. Like, dude,
That kills it.
you'll win her heart.
All right, so that's the intro for myself and Paul. For the rest of the episode, we're going to be talking about some other random topics. Sorry, we kind of had to splice things together. We just wanted to get this episode out so we can get things rolling, and into episode 2, where it'll be much more structured, easy to go through one topic. We'll have some fun with it as well. So thank you for listening, and here's the rest.
Did you try to sneak a peek and figure out any of the things I wrote down?
No, dude, I didn't even really have an opportunity to.
Because I thought of it and I'm like, I'm gonna throw it in there so I don't forget. But then that
it's
was
in Drive.
yeah, it's in the writing one, I think. But
Okay.
I wanted to put him in, and then I was like, but then he's gonna know, and it's gonna give away the fun.
Are we still doing the?
These were all ones I just came across today and thought like that would be a fun thing to just. I have a little,
right.
just a little something.
Okay, so Paul took some notes today of topics that he thinks we might want to bring up, and he left me little clues to try and figure out what they might be, and it's no big deal.
This one might be my favorite.
The next one that we have on here is Bush Tolkien, and I do want to take a stab at this one. I think that this is a portmanteau of Bushido and Tolkien. and this is about an Asian version of a Tolkien type story, something like that. Is that what's going on?
No. Oh, I wanted you to get it so bad.
Was I close? Was I getting there?
I
Not at
mean,
all.
obviously Tolkien, you can
Right.
catch that. And you don't know the connection with George W. Bush?
No, is there really? Dude, you're deeper in conspiracy than I am.
This is
and
this
that's
is
saying
my
a lot.
This is my thought, because I had a random thought today of remembering when these movies came out. So imagine the room, and they're like, December, big movie time of 2002.
Right.
Comes out The Two Towers. Imagine being in that room the year before. You know, they were shooting and doing all of it, and they're like, guys, we have this big movie we're about to release
Right.
called The Two Towers.
We have the opportunity to do something really funny.
Like, how odd is it that just lines up that movie came out like just over a year after that happened? So they were working on The Two Towers.
Dude,
when
right.
that happened.
But what if he started those movies a year earlier? And they were coming out 3 months after 9/11.
Right.
The Two Towers was coming out.
How
That would have
amazing.
been, what would they have done?
Like,
Because a lot of media changed their shit
oh yeah.
after, like, even the the music that we use for this podcast, that band. I don't know if we should say it. We're in limbo right now on the band status. So, but they had to change an album cover because it featured the World Trade Center being blown up behind them, and it was like their album was releasing that year, and they're like, "Wow, we can't do that anymore."
Which
yeah,
they
there was
should
a
have
lot of
leaned
stuff
in.
like that.
They should have leaned in. And
I think in hindsight, a lean in would have been absolutely beautiful at this point.
Oh yeah, that would have been.
Things were so different back then, though. Like everybody was like,
Oh,
at least had some reverence for the situation. Now in hindsight, as we analyze it more deeply, it's a lot easier, and we're further away. It's a lot easier to be flipping about, but
well, yeah, and
that was a big deal.
in that moment. Like, the whole country's just kind of shaken.
Yeah, went to a mass psychosis event for a while.
Yeah, where we made a lot of poor choices and gave up a lot of different freedoms. Which, you know what?
Very much so.
I know that's a line the right loves to use, but, like, it's true. We gave up a lot of our freedoms. Like,
Oh, an incredible
like, hey,
amount.
government,
Yeah.
go ahead, spy on me all day. Totally cool.
Yep. Nonstop.
If it stops
Collect
the
it all,
terrorists,
just in case. Yeah.
because
That's
I'm who they should worry about. Go through
Yeah,
my
we're-
stuff.
definitely. I have a friend that I've traveled with a few times, a Browner gentleman, and
I just
dude,
like
I'm
the
not
way you
even-
said it.
I'm not even joking. I know, right? The out of the 3 times, maybe 3 times, 4 times we traveled together, 2 or 3 of those times he was pulled for secondary through TSA.
Of course.
While I went straight through. And one of those times they pulled me out of line to go to the express line for some reason.
Yeah. For some reason. Maybe they correctly identified your white face. That was all they needed.
Oh god.
You're probably wearing loafers or boat shoes and khakis and with a white face.
Was, dude. I literally had boat shoes on. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
That is like the least intimidating footwear a man can have on.
This guy will be easy. Come on, please, sir.
Yeah, this guy's in vacation mode at the airport.
Right.
He's fine.
Yeah. It's it was wild. And yeah, I talked to him about it. I was like, we talked about it very openly after the fact each time. Like, they pulled you for secondary again. He's like, yep, that's what it is.
Yep.
Like, that happens. And the the worst part about it, he wasn't even the right kind of brown. He's an Indian guy. You know?
Not even the right kind.
In a war before we